Featuring today from your favorite news outlets at offthepress.com. It is another day of crisis in the Middle East as a ground war in Gaza City appears imminent. Israel has warned residents to flee in what the military calls a humanitarian move, but Hamas wants them to stay as human shields. An invasion could come this weekend. At home, cities across the nation are readying for a day of rage called for by Hamas against Jews. Americans have prepared by buying self-defense ammo and guns. On Capitol Hill, the Republicans still haven't picked a new House Speaker. After nominating Majority Leader Steve Scalise, he realized he didn't have the votes and bowed out. So just like before, there is no clear frontrunner for the job. And we're hearing about a costly new program the Biden administration is pushing to spend billions providing food and housing to some 5.7 million illegal immigrants. For stories like these and more updates all day long from your favorite news outlet, go to Off the Press.
Good evening, America, and welcome to this Just the News, Real America's Voice special report. I'm your host, John Solomon, tonight in partnership with our sponsor, the Association of Mature American Citizens, or AMAC as most people know it. We are continuing our third presidential candidate interview in our 2024 Town Hall series. Just last week, we sat down with author and entrepreneur Vivek Ramaswamy, and then one day later, we made our way down to Mar-a-Lago to sit down with former President Donald Trump. And over the course of the next few weeks, we will bring you more exclusive sit-down interviews with Republican presidential candidates, starting tonight with the 33rd governor of North Dakota, Doug Burgum. But first, I'd be remiss if I didn't introduce my distinguished co-host for tonight's journey. She's rejoining me from AMAC, the CEO, Rebecca Weber, currently is the head of that conservative organization that rivals AARP and looks to provide seniors with benefits, information, and a lot of great political intelligence. Under Rebecca's guidance and leadership over at AMAC, they have established a network of more than 2 million members. It's incredible and has become one of the most influential grassroots organizations in America and a great partner with Just the News. Rebecca, it's a privilege to have you here in the studio. Day 3 of the Town Hall series, Governor Burgum, not a lot of people may know him. Looking forward to this moment.
I really am looking forward to it. We had an incredible time with both Vivek Ramaswamy and former President Donald Trump. Those were interesting. And I think with John, we heard questions that we wouldn't typically hear on the debate stage. Yeah, this gives these candidates an incredible opportunity to speak direct to the American people.
Yeah, and AMAC members tipping in with their own questions, which has been fantastic. Governor Burgum has burst on the stage. He's sort of been the guy that likes substance, and he tries to cut through. Sometimes they cut off his mic at the debates. Tonight, we're going to hear from unfiltered, unadulterated. What are some issues you think he'll be addressing tonight?
You know, I hope that he'll really address economy, certainly, our border security. We see what's happening there, national security. China, very important, on top of mind for most people. So this will be a great opportunity to really give him that opportunity to address the American people.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. And, I was thinking we had this incredible interview with President Trump on Friday night. We got on the plane Saturday morning and all heck broke loose in the Middle East. And his words echoing about the danger of weakness in national security when you project weakness on the world stage. Bad actors, he say, take advantage, they step into the void, and they create violence, and that's exactly what happens. Less than 24 hours after we interviewed him with what happened with Hamas in Israel over the weekend. That's going to be one of the big questions we'll be asking the governor. China, Iran, some of the other ones on the world stage, also people keeping a close eye, and I think those will come up today as well.
That's right. And I'm really thrilled to be here today with all of you. This is a great opportunity to remind people that there is an organization that's looking out for you. That's AMAC, the Association of Mature American Citizens. We're offering a great discount, John. Thank you for allowing me to share that great discount for people who want to. Yeah, and for people who want to join or renew, we're giving a special 5-year AMAC membership for $35. You can go to amac.us/town hall, amac.us/town hall. I'm excited.
Yeah, listen, Friday night, I was going back to the hotel to write my Donald Trump story, and people were texting me saying, I signed up, I did AMAC, and so we want everyone to join. Match me on my 5-year membership. I got to tell you guys, it's the best investment I've made. It pays for itself in a few weeks with the discounts you get. Every time I travel, I whip out my AMAC card, I'm ready to get a discount. But also the political intelligence is something else that I'm really proud of, and I learned a lot about through my membership. all the civic opportunities, particularly that AMAC Action provides its members, the opportunity to be an election observer, opportunity to contact your state legislator or a member of Congress and talk about policy prescriptions for America. It is such a vibrant community. You're not joining an organization, you're joining a community, I think.
That's exactly right. Our members love that they get involved in really the national dialogue. So many calls to action, not a lot of work. You really don't have to leave your home to have an impact. But I always say, imagine if when we go to Washington, D.C., representing Americans 50 plus, mature Americans, and we say we have 5 million, 10 million members. They're listening to us now, and we're doing a lot of great work, but we need more members in order to bring your voice to Washington.
Yeah, and what I love about AMAC, and the more I become integrated into it, the more I realize that Real America's Voice, in the name of this network, that's really what AMAC does. It gives every person over the age of 50 an opportunity to have their voice heard, to have their voice engaged in politics. The opportunity is amazing. The monthly magazine, I can't wait when I get that, because I come with 10 ideas to assign to reporters here. Just so many different things that come with a membership. With this series, being able to sit down and have an hour conversation with each of these people trying to become the next president of the United States, what is some of the things you hope AMAC members take away from it? Yeah,
well, AMAC members want to know that they can trust in their leadership, in our government. And I think today, public trust is at an all-time low. They're concerned. Our seniors have worked so hard. They ought to know that their Social Security is going to be there in future years. Cost of health care keeps rising. It's another very important issue. But I do think it comes back to securing our border, very important to AMAC members and to most Americans. They want to make sure that we're not letting terrorists into this country. That's a major, major concern.
Absolutely, and I'm sure we're going to get to a lot of economic questions too. All right, folks, we're going to take a quick commercial break. When we come back, Governor Doug Burgum from North Dakota, presidential candidate, up next right after these messages. Welcome back, America. It's time to dive right into our conversation. It was hard to believe it's just a few short months ago when North Dakota's governor jumped into the GOP presidential race. And then, very quickly, Americans got to know him, his substance, and his policies. And today, he is here joining us in the studio. Governor Doug Burgum, welcome. Good to have you here, sir.
John, great to be with you, and great to be with you, Rebecca.
Yeah, great honor to have you here, sir. We're going to start the first question with Rebecca. Go ahead, Rebecca.
Thank you so much, Governor. We appreciate you joining us today. Millions of Americans were shocked and horrified by Hamas's brutal attack on Israel, including the barbaric killing of at least 40 babies. Now, President Biden has been slow to respond. In fact, the administration's initial response was to urge both sides to refrain from violence and retaliatory attacks. If you are the commander-in-chief right now, what action would you take to confront radical Islamic terrorism, including Iran?
Well, first of all, like all Americans, our hearts and prayers go out to the people of Israel. This is horrific. It's unthinkable. Rebecca, you talked about it. I mean, the idea that any of us a week ago thought that we'd be hearing reports of, beheadings of babies, innocent slaughter of people in their homes. This is absolutely Israel's 9/11, only at a multiple much higher than what we experienced here. And I think we all understand how that was etched into America's psyche. So this is a wound that is going to be there forever. But in terms of your question, since we announced our campaign on June 7th, we said we're running on three things: economy, energy, and national security. And the key in national security, and we said, what are the issues? And one of the issues is you can't just go after if I can use a business term, you can't go after the subsidiary companies like Hamas and Hezbollah if the parent company, the regime that's running Iran, the one that's actually financing all of this terror around the world's largest sponsor of state terrorism, that we continue to, with the Biden administration, to try to make friends with them. I mean, the whole effort to try to revive what was the failed Obama-Iran nuclear deal is the Biden administration has been doing that. It's been hidden in different ways, but the $10 billion that got released earlier this summer that didn't even make the headlines in June, the $6 billion more recently on this so-called hostage deal. I mean, what person in America would say, I'm going to trade 5 of my team for 5 of your team, but I'll also throw in $6 billion. I mean, that makes no sense to anybody. And part of it's because I really believe it's part of a revival of the Iran nuclear deal, which in 2015 there was a law that was passed that said that we couldn't do a nuclear deal with Iran unless Congress approved it. So the Biden administration, like they do in a lot of other things, trying to bypass the law to try to get this deal done. And now it just comes home to roost that this is happening. But the worst on top of all of this, which nobody is reporting and no one's talking about, is the fact that if you look at the oil exports coming out of Iran in the last few months, they've skyrocketed. Where they're headed, they're heading to China. China's rebuilding their strategic petroleum reserve with Iranian oil, and then billions, and it's estimated this could be $25 billion of revenue coming to Iran from the sale of oil and gas. And so if we have sanctions, they should be enforced. If we have the $6 billion, it should be refrozen. It should have been never unfrozen in the first place, because, I mean, rule number 1 is don't negotiate with terrorists. And that's effectively what Joe Biden has been doing since he's been in office. And so it comes home to roost now, and it's whether it's our failure to have deterrence in Ukraine, which enabled Putin to actually do his invasion. He would have never invaded Ukraine if he hadn't already had all of Western Europe dependent on his energy. So we've got an administration that's bent on appeasement, whether it's the withdrawal from Afghanistan, whether it's the failure of us to have deterrence in place to prevent Putin from going into Ukraine, and then now again negotiating and actually giving billions of dollars to an enemy that attacks us every day from a cyber standpoint, that's supplying. Iran supplies weapons to Russia to attack the people and the free people of Ukraine. And so it's like, why are we helping the people that are hurting us? And so this makes no sense to me. So your question is as president, obviously the thing I do is I would bring the fight to the parent company, and I would make sure that if you're a Hamas or a Hezbollah agent anywhere in the world, these are global terrorist organizations, that there be no safe harbor for you anywhere, because we have to eliminate the ability for these organizations to extract terror against our allies. America is more prosperous and safe when our allies are more prosperous and safe, and an attack on Israel is effectively an attack on the United States.
Thank you.
Sir, I want to ask a little bit about Iran. We've been dealing with this cycle of terrorism for 40, 50 years. In the Burgum administration, is regime change an ultimate goal in Iran for you?
Well, it's certainly something that if you talk to people, I mean, I went to college with folks that were from Iran, and they were here in going to graduate school when the Iranian Revolution happened, and they went from prosperous families with ties with the U.S. to whatever, to essentially not knowing if they could pay their rent the next month.
Right.
I mean, and then their siblings and parents, whatever, trapped behind the regime that's still in power now, and we see what the oppression that they do to women, and so it's a tragedy when we think about the human rights violations that are going on in that country with the regime, who's really got a goal, which is death to America and death to Israel. And so that is certainly a challenge. And I think that, again, right now, when idea that somehow we're giving them the billions they need to attack us and our allies, that has to stop.
Yeah. The recent Hamas attack on Israel's border has caused so many Americans even greater concern about the security risks of our own porous border. 200,000 illegal migrants crossed last month alone. The Biden administration has begun installing more miles of the Trump border wall. As president, what would you do to ensure that terrorists don't enter our country through the southern border? And also, what measures would you take to ensure that terrorists have not already entered?
Well, Rebecca, I'm afraid on your last question is that we're too late. I mean, it's just unbelievable what's happened under the Biden administration. I've been down to the border more times than the president has. We've had troops down there, multiple deployments. When I was there in August, we had two groups that were deployed. One that was supporting Texas and trying to protect the border. The other was a group of our National Guard airmen that were flying helicopter missions and leading that mission from San Diego to the Gulf Coast, specifically trying to stop these transnational criminal organizations. And think of it, in the time that Joe Biden has been in office, it's the equivalent, 6.5 million people that have come across and been given asylum papers. Those are the ones we're processing. That's every man, woman, and child in the state of Maine, New Hampshire, Vermont, Rhode Island, Joe Biden's home state of Delaware, and then you have to throw in Montana, everybody in Montana to get 6.5. And I'm down there getting the briefing from the Border Patrol, and there's a number on there on the wall. And I said, what's that? Well, that's the known gotaways. Known gotaways is people that they see on camera, but we don't have papers on. That's another 1.5 million. In the sector that we were in Texas, there was people that had come in from over 100 countries. It's not just Latin America, 100 countries. And guess what? People on the terrorist watch list, people from Syria, people from Iran, people from China. I mean, all of the people that are our known enemies are entering our country, and they're actually using the Biden administration policies like family separation. Border Patrol said people come in and they may be a terrorist, known terrorist, affiliated with a terrorist, but they've got some youth with them that they claim as a family member, and then we can't separate them because we're pursuing a policy that's not about national security. It's about an idealistic goal that is not making the nation more safe, because you know what else is coming across the border? Fentanyl. Mm-hmm. And we're taking mass casualties. We have an invasion of people, and we're taking mass casualties. The number now, staggering number of overdose deaths in our country since Joe Biden took office is now approaching 270,000 deaths since he took office. That's 300 a day. That's equivalent of 5 Vietnams worth of casualties. 70% of those are fentanyl overdoses. And if we lost an airplane today with 300 people, and then we lost another one tomorrow of Americans that went down, and then the next day, by the time we got 4 days out, everyone would be calling your kids and your grandkids and your friends, don't get on an airplane. We've got to have a solution to this. But when we lose them one at a time, a son, a daughter, a niece, a nephew, a mom, or a dad to a fentanyl overdose, it's just silently happening. This tragedy is happening every single day, and the Biden administration is really doing nothing about it. And so now, only belatedly, because we had some liberal mayors like in New York City saying we cannot take millions of more migrants, we can't afford this, it's bankrupting our cities, does Joe Biden, come up and say, oh, well, I guess we have to spend the money to do this. And then meanwhile, we're underfunding our Border Patrol, completely underfunding our Border Patrol, and then who would go into the Border Patrol? The federal government is effectively defunding the Border Patrol the way some of our liberal cities are defunding the police, because why would you go into a field of law enforcement if you don't get to do it? When we were down there, the only troops on the border were our troops from my home state. Because you know where the Border Patrol were? They were back at a soft-sided facility, aka a tent, burning through $20 million a month, processing these hundreds of thousands of people that you're talking about. They're doing paperwork, not computer work. They're doing paperwork. They didn't go into law enforcement. So if you say, what would you do to control the border? Because we cannot have national security without border security. I will be down there in the first 2 weeks. Biden didn't get down there for the first 2 years. And we will actually empower the Border Patrol to do their job, because if they've secured the border before, they could secure it again if they have the money, the technology, and the staffing to do it. But guess what? The cartels on the other side have so much money. They've got drones. They're making tens of millions of dollars a week on human trafficking. The spot where I was at, where people were literally walking across the river, they don't just, we picked a shallow spot. No, the cartel says, we control this spot. You can't cross here. Give me all the money you have left in your pocket. Some of these people made it to the border after a long journey. 7.5 million people have fled Venezuela, and then they get there and then they get extorted for take $1,000 out of their pocket to walk the last 150 yards. Why? Because they know that when they get to our side, then the Joe Biden administration is going to give them a bus ticket and basically some promise that they've been sold that's going to happen on our side of the river. So the thing is the biggest unreported crisis going on in our country. And now with these other global affairs, it'll get buried again, but every single day, this is a humanitarian crisis, it's a national security crisis, it's an economic crisis. It's unbelievable to me that there's not coverage on this crisis every single day.
Yeah, there needs to be. Sir, I want to talk about an issue that almost never gets discussed in the national media. Rural America has so many challenges ahead of it right now. You have foreigners buying up farmland. You have healthcare access that's really spread out very thin in rural areas. You've got the price of diesel making everything from the pickup truck to the tractor a lot more expensive. Give us your assessment of what's going on in rural America and what policies you would do to address their needs.
Well, I can tell you one place where rural America is doing great, and that's in my home state. We've got the highest GDP of any Republican-led state in the nation. We have got the highest workforce participation of any state in the nation, across 70%. We've got among the lowest unemployment. Our population is growing. It's getting younger. People are, building families. Our cities are thriving. So our education scores are among the highest SAT median scores in the nation. So we've got a lot going on. But that's not to say we don't have challenges. But having grown up in a small town and leading a state and having, built a global company with kids from small towns, I really understand it. And I know from being on the ground in Iowa and New Hampshire, everything you're saying, John, is absolutely true. I mean, again, you mentioned just diesel. I mean, diesel is part of what rural America runs on. And whether you're a lobsterman in New Hampshire or a farmer in Iowa, they'd all like to be getting 20% off on their diesel tomorrow. But no, I mean, our sanctions turned Russia into China's discount gas station. So China's getting, discounted oil and gas, but not Americans. But it's a challenge. One of the things is a challenge is healthcare and healthcare services in rural areas. But we've come up with innovative ways, even with the disease of addiction. There weren't enough addiction counselors. We created a program in our state where now we have over 1,000 peer support specialists. They get paid more if the clients they work with get a place to live, get a driver's license, and get a job. So we've got incentives. Okay. And when I say lived experience, they may actually have come out of the criminal justice system with a felony because they ended up as a felon because of a nonviolent drug charge. But in North Dakota, we understand that addiction's a brain disease, and that we have to address it like a healthcare problem, and that we've got people helping people. So there's a lot of ways where we've lowered the cost, improved the services, created jobs for folks, and so we've got a lot to say. We've got a Main Street initiative in our state too, where we're focusing on smart infrastructure, vibrant downtowns, workforce infrastructure, and even in rural areas, one of the biggest challenges is childcare, and we came up with innovative programs to support women entrepreneurs. To make sure that those people that want to work have access to affordable, high quality, and and really high quality and accessible and safe childcare for their families. And so when we do that, that's one of the ways that we've been able to achieve the workforce challenge, which our whole nation is a challenge. But we got college educated women that want to work. Let's make sure that they've got the infrastructure to be able to do that for them and their families.
Innovation at work. That's
yes.
what's going on now.
Excellent. Governor, hundreds of AMAC members submitted questions for this interview. AMAC is the conservatives' alternative to AARP. We have a great question from Nikki Coletti in Glendale, Arizona, and she asks you, how would you rectify the national debt and would you bring oil independence back to the United States?
Well, great question, Nikki. And yeah, the debt it's such a big number that it's hard for people to get their head around when we throw out numbers like $33.5 trillion. But I was looking the other day, if I was going to pay each of you $1 every second, and I just started picking off $1 every second, it would take me almost 32,000 years to hand you $1 trillion.
That puts it in perspective.
I mean, it's like even that is like, wow. I mean, 32,000 years is hard to get your head around. I mean, this is like almost like geologic time, but these are just massive numbers. But we have a big economy, and one of the ways that we can get that debt taken care of is we've got to get our economy sprinting instead of crawling. It's crawling right now, and it needs to be sprinting. So high growth. We can reduce federal spending for sure. In North Dakota, when I became governor, we cut 27% out of the general fund. Not slowed growth, not grew a little less. No, we actually took a number and made it lower, 27% lower on spending, and every train still left on time. And how did we do that? Well, part of it's because my background. I mean, I'm not a politician. I mean, I was a business leader and had 30 plus years of experience in the tech business. I mean, in that last debate, I was the only one on stage that has been making payroll since my mid-20s. I'm the only one that's created thousands and thousands of high-paying jobs. And when you do that, and you're in the software business where there's no tariffs and there's not subsidies. I mean, the part of the software business I was in, it was just like raw competition. You had to be better, faster, and cheaper the next day. Bringing that mentality to government, you can take out all kinds of cost out of government. Every single job and every single agency at the state and federal level, there's 10 to 20% of what those well-meaning team members are asked to do that adds no value to any citizen, and they know it. So it becomes mind-numbing, soul-sucking work. To do this. So back on Nikki's question, I mean, one of the things that is crazy, we've got this big deficit right now, and America has 240 million acres of federal land. Theodore Roosevelt, the father of modern conservation, put that land away and specifically said for the benefit and the use of the American people. That is on our balance sheet. The largest landowner in America is actually America. The largest mineral owner in America, it's not an oil company, it's America. And whether that's earth minerals, whether it's uranium for nuclear, whether it's oil and gas, the largest is the United States. And the Biden administration wants to shut it down and say that asset is off limits. We're going to buy it all from our enemies. And guess what? They don't produce it as cleanly as we do. If you cared about the environment, you would want to have every ounce of liquid fuels. You'd want to have every electron of electricity, everything produced here in America, because we produce it cleaner, safer, and better than anyone else. When we try to shut down the U.S. energy industry, it does not reduce demand. It just displaces supply. It takes American supply and gives it to some foreign entity who is not operating with the same goals. China is the largest polluter in the world. United States is taking more CO2 out of the air than any country on the planet. Why would we shift our future towards all EVs? Why would we subsidize 500,000 charging stations and subsidize EV cars and then buy our batteries from China, who controls 85% of the rare earth minerals, and then they're the ones that are now running their economy on coal. They're opening up a coal plant every week. So for Nikki's question, yes, energy, it's not just energy independence, it's energy dominance. Because with energy dominance, then we're supplying ourselves and all of our allies. That helps push back on these dictators. It stabilizes the world. It lowers inflation. It brings manufacturing jobs back. It does all of that. And again, I mean, just another example of the craziness where the Biden administration, at the time of the Russian invasion, we were importing 400,000 barrels of oil a day into New England of dirty Russian heating oil. Why were we doing that? Because you can't, under the Biden administration in the state of New York, you can't get a permit for a pipeline from natural gas from Pennsylvania up into New England. New Hampshire, people in New Hampshire, 41% are still heating their homes with heating oil. just right away, if you care about the environment, let's switch that over to clean natural gas. Let's just do that. But we can't get it done because the people that want to save the environment block the pipeline. And when they block the pipeline, then we start buying from Russia. I mean, it's just, we need to have someone in the White House who understands the economy, understands system economics, and understands how we can solve this. Because Nikki's question is, we've got to balance the budget, and we can do that without raising taxes. We do that by cutting spending. We don't have a revenue problem. We've got a spending problem. And on the revenue side, developing our energy, I mean, her question was perfect. Develop the energy, and it drives revenue in for the American people. It's our balance sheet. It doesn't belong to a bureaucrat in the Biden administration who's unelected. It belongs to the American people. Let's use it to support ourselves, support freedom, and support our allies.
Sir, I know you've done a lot of thinking. When I went out to the Midwest in the summer, when you talk about Washington, it might as well be a foreign country to most people. They feel like, oh, that's the weirdest place in the world, and yet it's our capital. What would you do to restore trust in government while shrinking it? And do block grants play a big role in your idea of shrinking bureaucracy and getting government closer to people?
Absolutely, and John, I'm also going to go back because you mentioned in your multiple question thing about rural America and selling in North Dakota. A corporation can't own farmland. Wow. You and I couldn't own farmland. You and I couldn't say we're going to start a business and do that. We can do that. Well, and that's been in place for over 100 years. We strengthened that this year to make sure everybody absolutely understood. I mean, so there's no foreign country, there's no foreign corporations, there's no U.S. corporations that own farmland, and we protect that asset for America. We have to have food security as part of our national security.
Yeah, that's important.
So back to this question.
Yeah, block grants and shrinking government.
Yes, well, absolutely. I mean, I'm a 10th Amendment guy. 10th Amendment, 28 words. These are the powers that are delegated to the federal government. And people forget that because it doesn't say actually in there who delegated it to the federal government. Well, the states delegated it to the federal government because the original states created the federal government, and they created the federal government with limited powers. And then it goes on to say, and those that are not specifically delegated to the federal government, are reserved to the states or to the people. Importantly, both of those things, because the federal government not only is in the lane of the states, and I have a front row seat as a governor, where we're fighting right now on 20 different fronts on rulemaking. These aren't laws coming out of Congress. These are unelected bureaucrats in the Biden administration that are racing the clock to try to drive all this stuff through. And when they say it's a rule coming out, that rule might be 800 pages long, and it's 1,000 rules. It's not one rule, but we're releasing the new rule. And it's a euphemism to make you think it's like a simple thing. Right. And so we've got every agency in our state working together. We're suing the federal government. We're the tip of the spear. We've won on the waters of the USA. We won on blocking them. This is the first administration since Harry Truman that hasn't held the legally required quarterly lease sales on Bureau of Land Management land for oil and gas minerals. So when they're blocking that, they're actually driving inflation because they're shutting down U.S. production, they're displacing it someplace else. So we're fighting and winning on all these things in North Dakota, but the block grant Department of Education, I agree with Ronald Reagan on a lot of things. He was the first president to say, let's get rid of the Department of Education. That was when he was running in 1980. I mean, let's get this thing done. Yeah. That's not a charter in the federal government for them to be running education. Education is state and local. And we could drive that money, but in North Dakota, half of our own state Department of Education, you know what they do? It's people sorting their way through all these federal grants because they tie all these ideological rules to the money that's coming out. Strip all that away. States get to decide that. If you want it, you either don't send the money, or if you do, just send it as a block grant. And then actually get the federal government, Department of Energy based in D.C. Anybody producing energy here? I don't think so. Maybe that should be relocated to Texas. How about Department of Agriculture? Maybe that could go to Iowa. It's like the idea that somehow it needs to be here. And I do give credit. Ryan Zinke, when he was Department of Energy, he did get part. There's almost zero federal land in the eastern part of the state, and he got a portion of the Bureau of Land Management relocated to western Colorado, so the people that work there might actually understand what it's like to be on the land or from the land, or or get on federal land, because it's just, and of course the buildings here, most of them are empty because people are still working remote. But it's like, I guess we're proving that they don't have to be in DC if they can work from home. So let's get them back out closer to our country. If you were a company, you would not consolidate. You wouldn't have all your team members working at corporate headquarters, or you'd get them out to where your customers are. I mean, that makes sense. So part of this is return the power to the states, return the power to the people, shrink the size of the federal government, take out that waste that's in every single job and every single agency. You could get rid of 20% of the federal employees and not miss a beat just by redesigning the work, because that's what industry has to do.
Right.
Yeah. Excellent. I do want to stay on the economy just a moment here. Despite President Biden's claim that his policies are restoring the American dream, a recent Pew Research poll revealed that 6 in 10 Americans believe that life is worse for them today than it was 50 years ago. What would you do to restore economic optimism? I think this is an important question.
Well, absolutely it is, and we have to have leadership that can paint a vision of how the American dream is still alive, and how people, we could be entering a golden age right now of technological advancement. And I know that with with the folks that you work in your amazing organization that are, older in life or more years under the belt, more wisdom. I mean, one of the things that's really remarkable right now is all the advances that are coming in healthcare. I mean, we're going to have breakthroughs in the next 5 or 10 years where we could actually eliminate entire disease classes. I mean, the opportunity for America to finally achieve breakthroughs because of what's happening in technology and AI is really, really remarkable. So that's exciting. But of course, we don't talk about that because we end up talking about all the issues. In our campaign, we know that if we do the executive branch right, I've seen it in North Dakota, if you do it right, you can improve every American life. Every age, everybody can improve. And then we also say, what do we do in North Dakota? We focus on bringing out what we call the best of America, which is, where are the examples of cities that are safe and where education is doing well and where neighbors are helping neighbors and it doesn't involve federal dollars and federal grant dollars. That's happening every day in our country, but nobody talks about it. Part of the bully pulpit is focusing back on what's working in America, not just the things that aren't working, because we have a ton of things that are absolutely, totally working fantastically in our country.
Thank you.
Sir, we have another question from an AMAC member. This one sent by video. Scott Costeras of Wisconsin asked a question. Let's listen.
Moving forward, how does conservatism, such as limited government, individualism, traditionalism, and the preservation of traditional institutions, customs, and values fit into the Republican Party? Thank you.
That's a good question, Governor.
Well, it's a fantastic question, and it's great that you've got be able to bring viewers right in with this.
That's the benefit of the AMAC partnership.
Way to go, AMAC. Well, I just want to say to the questions asked is this is the core. I mean, this is what our country's built on. Our country was built on a set of aspirational ideals. And we do have some detractors in our country that feel like that they should be apologizing for our country when we've set aspirations higher than any country in the history of the planet. We have lifted more people around the world. American capital markets, American free markets, American principles, and American technology have lifted 1 billion people out of abject poverty in the last 25 years. That's never happened in the entire history of our planet. We should be celebrating America every single day for what we've achieved, not only for people here, but the aspiration that we have for people around the world. And we still were in a position, if we're going to be competitive to win the Cold War with China, we've got to get our economy sprinting. To do that, we've got to be a country where we can attract capital and where we can attract talent. And still, all the best and the brightest in the world, if they had a chance to come someplace, it would come here. But why would they come here? Because, as the listener said here, the principles that we stand for, freedom and liberty. And we have to remember that. And the Republican Party's got to make sure, too, that we understand that we object to the overreach of the other side. We've got to make sure that we maintain our trust in the people, because we don't need a rule for every little thing. I mean, we've got to get it back to local control. I mean, school boards, library boards, and we're seeing a lot of great activism where people are getting engaged and running for these positions and in their communities, and that's what it takes. We've got to get parents involved. We've got to make sure that we've got choice for parents. All these things can happen at a local level, but again, with the 10th Amendment, That's not the president. The president of the United States has got things that he's got to focus on relative to the economy, relative to energy policy, and relative to national security. Because you get those three things right, and that empowers, every other aspect of what's going on in this country.
Excellent. Now, Social Security is currently on track to be insolvent by 2033, and that would mean a 23% cut in benefits for seniors. Congress has not acted. If they don't act, we're going to see this happen. As president, what would you do to ensure and protect Social Security?
Well, the first thing we have to do is we have to honor 100% the promise that we've made to the American people who've been paying into the system. We have to honor that. We owe them that. But I'm saying but if we honor that promise, pretending like this cliff that's coming that you've described, that first time I've actually had someone bring this up, in the entire time I've been campaigning, that we've got a thing that's going to happen, this 23% cut if you do nothing. Because people act like do nothing is honoring the promise. To honor the promise, we have to do something. And whether that's, let's take people that haven't been born yet. I mean, how about people that are under the age of 18? They've never paid in a dime. I mean, could we have a discussion about how things might have to change for them? Because if you're under 18 with all these advances I'm talking about, you're likely going to live to be 100.
Yeah.
Whatever challenges we have from an actuarial standpoint get worse when lifespans get longer, and we're heading into an increased period of lifespans. So if people want to just bury their head in the sand and say, oh, by not talking about it, we're going to honor and protect those individuals, we're not honoring that. To honor those people, we have to say, to make that promise, we have to figure out how do we add dollars to the system to make sure it's solvent, but how do we change it so that future generations aren't saddled with really bankrupting our country because we're making a promise you can't keep. These promises work when people have today's lifespan, not when their lifespan gets increased by 10 or 20 years. And so and the other thing is we've got to get the economy growing, because one of the ways that you get to solve the financial problems of our country is with high growth. And we can get high growth by cutting red tape, and that's as much as lowering taxes and as much as other things you get rid of regulation. That is a burden on every American family, every small business, every state. And in North Dakota this last year, we passed 51 red tape reduction bills. We started crowdsourcing ideas from the public. How is government getting in your way? Send us your ideas. We'll incorporate it into what we're doing. We've added a strategic planning process, not just a budgeting process. Budgeting processes are about inputs. Strategic planning is about outputs. What's the outcome we want to have? How do we want to provide a secure financial future for our citizens? That's the strategy. Okay, what's the budget we need to fulfill that? Not the other way around, which is, we have a budget crisis. Let's lurch till that for another 6 weeks. I mean, we're always letting the budget drive the strategy. In business, you've got to have strategy drive the budget. That's why we need a business leader in the White House. That's why you've got to have somebody who understands the economy and understands technology and understands the impact it's going to have on all of the programs that we have. But I would lead like what we've done in North Dakota. We made a solemn commitment to all of our state employees that, hey, we're going to honor your defined benefit plan, but we're also closing it. And we're going to have a competitive 401k plan for new team members that come to work for the state, because that's how we can compete to get the best and the brightest. If they want to have a service-oriented, purpose-filled job, working in a leaner, smarter agency that's actually doing fulfilling work, that's helping the citizens, whether it's working on the highway patrol or working in game and fish. I mean, but we've got to be competitive with the private sector. Government can't run like it's its own little thing. I mean, the jobs report last month, everyone's like, the jobs report was great. 76,000 of those jobs were government jobs. That's not the direction we need to go.
Yeah, no doubt. Sir, it's hard to believe that the hour is going by so quickly. I want to throw one last question at you, because I think a lot of people look out over the horizon. They think it is one of the defining questions for our country in the next generation. China, aggressive, growing economic competitor, sometimes a security competitor. What is your plan for dealing with China and everything from fentanyl, where they create the precursors, all the way through the economic competition we face?
Well, the first thing we need to understand is the competition we're in, which is that when we started, I was the only candidate saying every stop, we're in a Cold War with China. The Biden administration still hasn't said that. We are in a Cold War with China. We're also in a cyber war with China, and we're in a cyber war every day. And now it's becoming more apparent because of the collaboration between Russia, China, Iran, and North Korea, exchanging arms, exchanging plans, having these unlimited levels of cooperation between each other. But those four countries attack America every day from a cyber standpoint. And when I became governor, I was shocked, coming from the technology thing, that we virtually had almost no cyber protection for the citizens' data. We've built up one of the strongest cyber teams in the country. We're now helping some neighboring states. We've required that we've got to have appropriate education on cybersecurity starting in kindergarten. We're like, well, we've got people that use devices that are connected to the internet when you're starting in elementary school. They need to understand, if I'm going to do a report, and you say, well, that's just crazy. We have now had a thing that's been declassified in North Dakota. I can talk about it, but the North Koreans were in a K-12 school system that was a few miles from the Canadian border, into the power school where the grades are kept. Why were the North Koreans in there? They were in there because the parents of those kids worked for the North Dakota National Guard, and what did they do? They have the permanent ground mission protecting the 150 anti-ballistic intercontinental missiles that are pointed at North Korea are in North Dakota. Okay, so they were in trying to get access to nuclear, information, secrets, passwords, whatever, of the parents through a school system. So we've said this is a wake-up call, and we've got to do this. And then you call the DOD when this happened, X number of years ago, and they're like, wow, we're short tens of thousands of cyber people. They can't send the cavalry out to help you. So every state has been on their own. So we're like literally, forget, it's not coming through the federal government, the Department of Defense. We had school districts that were directly being attacked by North Korea. So this is like, wake up, America. We're in a cyber war every day. So, and China is also, of course, obviously supporting. They're the reason why North Korea still exists. So they're the parent company, China, subsidiary North Korea. And so we have to get smart, diplomatically, information-wise on the cyber stuff, militarily, and economically. And the biggest tool we have is energy. China, with 1.4 billion people, they don't produce enough energy to support their country. They don't produce enough food. That's why they've got the world's largest navy, because they're trying to protect their oil lanes, their sea lanes, their food lanes. They're doing that. But we've got a lot of tools. And we've had 4 members of the Biden administration there this year. None of them have brought up in China. They didn't all get to meet with the president. One of them did. But they never brought up energy, because energy is the biggest tool we have. That country is completely dependent on importing energy every day. As I said, largest importer in the world. That's a tool. They import food every day. They've got a rising unemployment. It's into the 20s, 20% plus unemployment for their youth unemployment. And they're vulnerable right now. The debt they have, the real estate crash they're heading. I mean, we have an opportunity, but we've got to have a whole of government approach to how we deal with China, and deal with that from a position of strength.
Yeah, so important. We're going to start. We're going to finish where we started. I'm going to leave the last question to my distinguished colleague.
Excellent. One question that's so important to so many Americans, especially Christians like me, is the issue of life and protecting the sanctity of life. Where do you stand specifically? You've signed strong legislation in North Dakota to stop the harmful practice of abortion, but have made it clear that you don't support national legislation. Could you help your voters understand why you opposed federal legislation?
Well, absolutely, but let's start with the fact that I'm a pro-life governor from a very pro-life state, and North Dakota's done a great job of protecting life in North Dakota. But when we take a look at the 10th Amendment, which I mentioned earlier, it specifically said what these certain things are delegated to the federal government, and I worry deeply that this is an issue, because I support Dobbs, that return it to the states. We fought for 50 years, get it returned to the states. Each state is settling in on what works for them. And then now people that fought for 50 years are running for president that said, well, I'll do this federal thing. But at the same time, we're running against a Biden administration that oversteps the federal role all the time. And I trust that the states will get this figured out. I trust that it'll sort in. And I know that what works in New York will never work in North Dakota, and vice versa. What works in North Dakota doesn't work in Minnesota. I mean, so it has to be sorted out at that level. And then we have to remember that the limited role of the federal government includes trusting the states. We have 50 platforms of innovation, if you will, and we're going to have some variances. But I understand how important this issue is. I understand how important it is in North Dakota. And again, we've signed legislation every session that have advanced this cause in North Dakota, but this is something that has to be left to the states.
Thank you.
That's exactly what the Founding Fathers probably intended. Governor, I want to thank you so much for spending so much time helping us to get to know you, your policies, and I think some people realized how much they got gypped during the debates when they cut off your mic. They would have got a lot more substance if they just let you talk. What a great honor to have you here today, sir.
Well, great to be with you, John and Rebecca, and again, thanks for not threatening to cut my mic off.
We would never do that. We could go, if we had another hour, we'd keep going.
And of course, I mean, it's interesting you get threatened to get cut off when I was trying to answer the questions that no one else was. I mean, I'm the only tech guy up there, and they're asking AI. Then I'm leading the energy state, and then can I answer the energy question? Could I answer the tech question?
Cut off the subject.
I'm the only guy that's created jobs. Could I answer the economy question? So we're happy warriors, and we're happy to be in this battle, and grateful for the time that we had here with you today.
Well, I think American voters are too. They love these sort of opportunities to have a discussion about this. What a great honor. Rebecca and I are going to be back in a few seconds. We're going to throw in a quick commercial break. We'll be right back. Welcome back, America, to this, our third special in the presidential town hall interview series. Rebecca, we just had an incredible conversation with North Dakota Governor Doug Burgum. I was really surprised by a lot of the thought he's put into national security and some of the national security issues that he's dealt with in North Dakota. I'd never heard before the North Korean infiltration of that school district. Shocking to think that, in a small town in the middle of America, there was a national security incident going on we didn't know anything about.
Knew nothing about that. I truly was impressed. I thought his love for country, anybody who listens to him, you can see this is a man who absolutely loves America and believes smaller government, more power to the people. He's got a pretty impressive track record there in North Dakota. He said he has reduced spending by some 27%. So that's something good for people to look at to say he can do it. he cares very much about people, and he's got some good solutions, John. I like some of his ideas.
Yeah, some of the stuff he talked about with mental health and drug counseling, even giving felons a second chance to get in, and they provide lodging and things to lure people there. They have the proper counseling staffs there to deal with the fentanyl crisis. That's one of the new innovative ideas that a lot of people have been talking about in North Dakota. Energy, big on energy. Big on the 10th Amendment. He brought up the 10th Amendment maybe 3 or 4 times, states' rights, and I think his idea for shrinking government, which everybody's talked about but no one's accomplished in recent years, the idea of using block grants to send the money back, get rid of the bureaucrats in Washington, in some cases, move whole agencies to the middle of America. I bet that's pretty popular in a lot of parts of this country.
Absolutely. Very interesting ideas. And he was thrilled, John, that his mic didn't get cut, that we let him speak, that he could speak on the issues of economy and national security. So it was really, really very interesting.
Yeah, listen, I think people want to be able to make up their own mind, and too much of the debates and the sound bites in the national news media cut off that ability. They want to either control the conversation, make themselves part of the story if you're a journalist. And here, we just let the candidate give American people what they really think, and you get a lot of ideas that way. I was really impressed by the substance. Something else that struck me in the course of the conversation, he really understands the China threat, and he talked about in North Dakota banning foreigners and corporations as cutouts to buy up farmland, but he mentioned food security. Very few candidates are talking about that, but when I talk to the intelligence community, that is something that's always on the top of mind.
Yeah, he sees the risks there and understands that we need to address China and going after, what did he say, the parent, not the subsidiary.
That's right.
Understand that China is pulling a lot of levers here. Same thing with Iran. I love, too, it was so inspirational when he reminded us all that over 1 billion people have been pulled out of abject poverty because of democracy, because of this great country, and because of America. And so there was real optimism in his voice and a reminder that every American deserves to grow old, retire with dignity, and have a long, good life with access to good quality health care. Make sure the benefits that you've paid into all these years are that you're getting your Social Security money. And he's not afraid to come up with new ideas and solutions and think differently for the future.
You know, obviously a politician, but an outsider in his own mind, and certainly coming from the business world, a lot of business-oriented solutions, very similar to what we heard from President Trump, former businessman, and Vivek Ramaswamy, all three of them approaching the shrinking of government like a CEO would approach it, not like a politician or a longtime member of Congress would. Another thing that I think really struck me, energy independence, and he talked about, listen, you can reduce carbon emissions, if that's the goal of some people, without wrecking the economy, and he talked about just getting people off of Russian oil in the Northeast and maybe substituting it with natural gas. One, you get security and you bring down carbon emissions. I think he's going to be one of the guys in the next few weeks that really move the energy debate forward. I don't know if you walked away with some impressions of that.
I do feel that way, and we certainly need that. And you know, John, his approach, I think, is because he's a businessman. As you've mentioned, there is a different perspective, there's a different approach, I think, when you've been in business. And he did mention that he's the one guy who has a lot of business experience, not quite as young as Vivek, and does take that approach. We saw that with Donald Trump. We saw how that made a difference. So it's interesting. I think American people like to see that diversity among the candidates.
Oh, there's no doubt. I mean, I remember in the Vivek Ramaswamy interview, he talked about if you're going to start cutting government, you go to a zero-based budget. That's a CEO idea.
That's right.
And here today, all the ideas of spurring economic growth, bringing power back to the states, getting government out of places it doesn't belong, the 10th Amendment, you see a CEO's mentality in all of that. It was really noticeable today. And I didn't know that much about his approach until today. I really felt like I learned a lot from the conversation. Rebecca, this partnership is so important to us here at Just the News and Real America's Voice. We love everything we do with AMAC. Today's a very special day for people who want to join the AMAC community because they love what we just accomplished here today. What's the best way for them to do that?
Go to amac.us/town hall to take advantage of a limited time offer, 5-year membership for $35.
Wow.
You're going to save more just by taking advantage of the great member benefits you mentioned. You get this great magazine delivered right to your mailbox, and we're going to be your voice in Washington, advocating on behalf of conservative Americans. You can participate in the national dialogue. We encourage people to get involved. So please visit us at amac.us/town hall.
You can't even get a dinner in Washington, D.C. for $35. That's how good a deal it is. All right, folks, go check that out. I want to thank you for watching tonight. We'll be back Monday with regular programming. God bless and good night.